I know we've only known each other for 4 weeks and 3 days, but to me, it seems like 9 weeks and 5 days.
All right. Welcome, all my passionate plant people and garden enthusiasts, to our Sunday edition of the Let's Get Growing show here on the Urban Gardener channel. I'm Enoch. I'm your host today. We've got a great show for you today. So definitely you're going to want to stick around for this show. This is the second Sunday of the month. And on the second Sunday of the month, here on the Sunday edition, we have joining with us Gardener Scott. Master Gardener Scott Wilson from the Gardener Scott channel joins with us each and every second Sunday of the month to answer all of your gardening questions. And we've got him coming up here in just a little bit on the show. So you're definitely going to want to stay tuned to that. And you're definitely going to want to bring all of your gardening questions for this great, fun conversation that Scott and I get to have each and every month. I'm looking forward to it. I can't believe it. It's already August already. We've been doing this most all of the season already, and it's just been wonderful each time to get together with our good friend Scott. So definitely stay tuned for that coming up here real soon. And if you are joining with us right here at the top of the show, definitely click that like button, hit the thumbs up there, and definitely hit the subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, hit that bell notification so you can be notified of all of our upcoming live streams and videos. So definitely do that and share with all of your friends and your friends groups, garden groups, all of anybody you know who loves to garden. Let them know about the Let's Get Growing show that we do here each and every weekend, every Saturday and Sunday, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on the Urban Gardener channel. So definitely don't keep our show all to yourself. Share it with all of your friends. Definitely. And a big, huge shout out to all of you who are watching us on the replay here at the top of the show. Thank you so much for taking your time to watch the show on your own time. You know, it's hard sometimes for some people to get here and join us live, as we're a live show. We love to have you here live. So definitely find an opportunity to join us live when you can. But if you're watching the replay, thank you so much as well too. Get into the comments below. Let me know you're here. Even if you're just saying hi, I want to hear from all of you. Definitely. If you got any suggestions or anything. And if you are here with us live though right now, definitely ask any questions, comments, or anything like that right in our chat feature here on the live stream. And we'll definitely try to get those questions in our conversations with our guest, and definitely today, because today is all about questions. So I want to see those questions. Definitely, everybody, bring them. We've got Gardener Scott with us. He's a plethora of garden knowledge. If there's anything you are wondering about the garden, anything you're dealing with in your garden right now this season, you're definitely going to want to ask those questions here coming up in just a little bit. And also, if you can, go into the description below. There's a link to join our Facebook gardening community, the Let's Get Growing community. Definitely go and do that, because that's a great opportunity for you to share your gardens with me. I love sharing my gardens and everything that I've got growing on here with you all on the Urban Gardener channel. But this group is a great way for you to all share with me your gardens and share with everybody else in the Urban Gardener community as well too, what you've got growing on. That's a great place. You can share your pictures, you can share video, you can ask questions, you can answer questions, and or you can just continue the conversation with some other people's posts and all of that. It's a great place. Go check us out at the Let's Get Growing group for sure. So right on. I hope all of you have been having a great gardening week so far. We've been having a great week here on the Urban Gardener channel. Just yesterday on the Let's Get Growing show, we had with us our good friend Greg Peterson. Greg Peterson from the Urban Farm podcast joined us for the the third time he's been on the show with us now, twice last season. He's a good friend of all of ours. I've actually been on his podcast about 3 times too as well. And we had a great conversation yesterday. Always good to catch up with him and what he's got growing on. He moved from Phoenix, Arizona to North Carolina in the last couple of years and is making this big transition, a major climate transition too. So he's got a lot of really good new gardening experiences for a gardener who's been gardening his whole life. You know what I mean? And that's always great though too. So it was kind of a very fun conversation with him as well. We got to meet Bowtie David, Bowtie Life in the Garden. Definitely awesome to meet David yesterday. A great viewer of the show from the Gardner Scott channel too. We talked a little bit about that as well too. So you want to go and check out yesterday's Saturday edition of the Let's Get Growing show for those great conversations for sure. Definitely. Right on, right on. So how's everybody been doing? How's everything been growing in your gardens? Love to hear about that in our chat here. Let's see, who do we got with us today on the show? You know, of course, we always got to start right at the top of the show by giving a big, huge shout out to our facilitator, Jay Dixon from Ontario, Canada, doing some great work for us in the chat feature here on the live stream. So definitely keep an eye out for any sort of links or anything like that as we're talking about different things. Jay will be right on that in the chat there. So definitely look at that for more information on different subjects. And yeah, thank you, Jay, for joining with us here. Let's see here. We've got Rick joined with us nice and early. He was on right before the show even got started. He's like, I'm ready and waiting all the way from down under in Australia there. Rick, great to see you. Thanks for getting up nice and early to join with us. Serena joining with us here as well too. Hey, cousin, how are you doing? All right, let's see here. Who else do we got joining with us today on the show? Of course, we've got our good friend Jersey Girl. Jersey Girl, thank you so much for joining with us here on the Sunday edition. And Adam, awesome to see you, Adam. Thanks for joining with us there. Definitely. One of the things I'll mention too, go check out last Sunday editions of the show. Last Sunday edition, I made this thumbnail right here. Introducing our moderator. Adam's a moderator for our chat here on the show as well too, and he joined with us just like our facilitator Jay did the Saturday before and had a great conversation. We got to meet him as well too, so we get to see him in the chat all the time, and so we got to meet him, and that was a really fun show last Sunday as well too. So again, thank you, Adam, for joining with us today. Thank you for getting on with us last week and having that great conversation. That was really fun. Skippy, awesome to see you. Good to see you back around. How you been doing? And happy Sunday to you. Awesome. Excellent. Let's see. Oh, we got a Jane Doe here saying, someone stole my flowers and derailed my entire existence and gardening experience. Oh, no. Well, don't ever let anybody take away your garden from you. I'll tell you this right here. I garden on alleyways. I garden, and most of my garden spaces are basically public facing, and most all of that sort of stuff I had to learn all early on in my gardening experience, that if I was going to be gardening and I was going to be growing, there were going to be people coming by and I was going to be losing some things. I'll share one story. It was my first watermelon I grew. It was big. It was juicy looking, but it wasn't yet ripe. I do know that for sure. I was waiting for it to get ripe. I was putting all the leaves around and moving the vines to try to hide it the best I could. And I was coming out each and every day to check on it. And then one day, and I knew it was still well before it was ripe, but that one day I come out and it wasn't there. I was devastated. Oh, I lost it. I was like, no way. I've been waiting this whole time from starting this plant from a seed all the way to watching this fruit grow and just getting there. It was getting so close to being ripe. And then someone took it from me. And I was so bummed about it. So what I did the next year is I grew more watermelon. where I grew more of every other thing is I started putting them around the alleyways, and I started just gardening and understanding the fact that sometimes I'm going to have to, what would you say, involuntarily share my garden with others, just because of kind of the way the space is and where it is in the alleyway. So most of that, I do have some stuff on the inside that if I saw somebody doing that sort of thing, I'm going to be checking my security cameras, because that's a little too far into my space to be trying to find things and stuff, which I have had happen, mind you. I've had happen. Never had anything really major stolen or anything like that. I've had a couple of people walk up onto the garden because it is kind of open. You walk right through the carport, right into the garden space, so I've had people that have walked right up there and started picking some strawberries or something like that out of the garden space, right out of my back patio. And luckily though too is that I was home for those, and I could go right out there and say, hey, yeah, that's not cool. That's not cool not at all. I get it if you're walking by the alleyway, you see something growing, like some of the tomatoes and things like that. Those end up going sometimes, and people end up picking those. And for the most part, I'm not too worried about that, because they are kind of a public facing space and everything. But anyways, even though I'm not going to let anybody steal my garden, or at least my garden experience. But thank you so much for joining with us here. Thank you, everybody. All right. You know what? We've got lots and lots of great things growing on today here on the Let's Get Growing show. I hope all of you are doing really well this week. And once again, thank you for joining with us. It is the Sunday edition of the show. We've kind of had a few wonky Sundays where we were just hanging out and doing some things, but we are really an official Sunday edition show this week. And with an official Sunday edition of the show, we also have In the Garden with our good friend Mark Boucher-Colbert. I hope you all enjoy.
Hey guys, I'm Mark Boucher-Colbert, and you're in the Garden with MBC. Welcome back for another episode of In the Garden with MBC. Today, you see all these bags I got? I want to talk cover crops. And this is an important part of any gardener's toolkit, let's say. We have a whole host of plants that will specifically do tasks for us in the garden. And I'm not talking about feeding us here or smelling pretty fruit, flowers, vegetables, but I'm talking about worker plants that we put to work for us to accomplish certain things. So a lot of us are familiar with, I'm just reaching for one of my faves here, but let me shake it and see if you can guess what it is. All right, that's going to be, you can kind of see what's inside there. Anyway, we'll get to that in a second. A lot of us think about cover crops as something for the winter, right? And we definitely should be planting cover crops during the winter to protect the soil. In the Pacific Northwest, where I garden, we have a lot of rain during the winter. That means water is coming down, percolating through the soil, and basically stealing or leaching out or dissolving nutrients, bringing them low where plants can't get them, or washing them away completely. So, could be washing our soil as well with erosion. So we want to protect the soil, especially in the winter, during the cold, during the rain, and basically bank those nutrients. When we plant cover crops for the winter, we take the nutrients from the soil, we bring them above ground in a plant form, and that's essentially a nutrient bank. The plant is holding onto them for us so the rain can't take it away. Then in the spring, we'll cut them back into the soil, let them dissolve, let them be digested, and then the microbes release those nutrients to the soil. Great practice. Everyone should be doing it. In addition, we have a lot of cool season cover crops that will capture nitrogen from the air. Nitrogen being the essential plant nutrient that they can't get for free. In other words, from the atmosphere. They get carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen from the atmosphere, from water vapor, from carbon dioxide. But they cannot get nitrogen from the atmosphere, even though it is abundant all around us. 70%, 71% of the atmosphere. Maybe it's higher, 79%, I think. Everything around us is nitrogen gas. Plants can't get it. And they need special relationships with various bacteria who can break it down. It can also break down a little bit in lightning, with high energy systems like lightning. But mainly the bacteria are doing it. And those bacteria mainly live with the legumes. So peas, beans, vetches, clovers, all that whole family of plants. And we probably heard a lot about them and the importance of planting that. They can capture nitrogen, bring it into the soil. This is something we have to provide with fertilizer. So right away, we're hearing two big benefits of my mind's on microgreens, on cover crops. Protecting soil, right, and kind of banking the assets of the soil, and then actually adding nutrients to the soil. But that's winter. I'm going to talk about other cover crops that we can be using for other purposes. Again, the idea being worker plants. They're plants that are going to work for us. And this one that I've been shaking around is buckwheat. I love buckwheat. It's a warm weather cover crop. So some of these things, look at those little, has the most interesting, I guess you'd call them dihedral shaped grains. These little faces that go off at angles to each other. Really cool seeds. Buckwheat is a fast germinating, fast growing summer cover crop. And let me give you an example of where I'd use it. First of all, what is the job it's going to do? It's going to outcompete other weeds. And it's going to protect the soil as well in a different way, not protecting it from the leaching effects of the rain, but protect it from the harsh effects of the sun and drying out from the wind. So a bare soil is subject to a lot of heating from the sun, right? It gets way warmer than a protected covered soil, and then a lot of drying. So that soil is going to be a bit under assault from the summertime elements. And so growing buckwheat, for example, causes a canopy to grow up very quickly. It's pretty broad-leafed. It shades out other weed seeds that are germinating, and it just provides that additional level of protection. It's nice because you can do it in a short window. Like I'm starting some kale from seed right now in pots, and I have some bare soil that I just harvested potatoes from. The kale's going to take 3 to 4 weeks before the plants are big enough to transplant. The soil is bare right now. I'm going to go ahead and throw some buckwheat in there and just get that buckwheat working for me. Conditioning the soil, adding organic matter. That's another thing all cover crops do. When you cut them down, the root structure and then any top growth that goes into the soil is all organic matter for the soil, feeding those microbes, keeping them alive so that they can then direct nutrients to the plant roots that are our target plants, our growing plants. So big shout out to buckwheat. There's a couple other kinds of summer cover crops you can grow. This is called an organic summer max blend. Mostly grasses in here, I think. Big tall grasses like Sudan grass, for example. Maybe some oats in here. I can't remember exactly what the blend is. I don't have it on hand right now. But the idea being that some soils, maybe you over fertilize. Maybe it's got too much nitrogen from a previous crop. And you might want to pull some of that nitrogen out. You might want to be making you might want some raw material for compost, your compost pile. You may want to, like for example, I know if you grow carrots in a soil that's too nitrogenous, they develop all kinds of roots and they don't develop properly. So if you need to pull some nitrogen out, something like this can do it, right? It's going to be high growth, high nitrogen consuming plants, and you can use it then as, like I said, some kind of green matter for your compost pile. And again, just conditioning and protecting the soil. No matter what's going on with the nutrient balance, you're providing a green cover to protect, intercept those solar rays, and convert them into carbohydrates that bacteria, fungi can use. Here's a favorite. Groundhog daikon radish. You've probably seen a daikon radish. Big, huge, sometimes enormous, giant, mainly white roots. These things tunnel down and they actually help to bust up some compacted soils. In addition, you can eat these in the winter, but if you use them purely as a cover crop, you're going to be using them as tunnelers. They're going to break open the soil for you, and then when winter low temperatures kill them, perhaps, they don't always die in the Northwest, that's the trick. You might have to chop them up and or do some light tilling, but if you get winter kill on these, then when they rot, they're going to create these air pockets, cavities in the soil that help to loosen and till. So instead of busting your back doing all this hard work, you can use daikon radishes. You can eat a few from time to time, but basically they're doing the work for you. They're digging down for you. So again, like, here's a cover crop we don't always think of, but it's doing some powerful work. Here's one of my favorites, Lacey Phacelia. Lacey Phacelia. This is a beautiful plant, and one of its chief benefits is that it is a gigantic attractor for pollinators. Pollinators, like all the bees, love this stuff. It's very easy to cut down and till in. That's another good aspect of some of these cover crops. Like, for example, buckwheat and Lacey Phacelia are very delicate plants. They're extremely easy to chop in, to use either a hand sickle, a weed whacker, even just a shovel. Just as you're chopping stuff in, you're going to be able to incorporate this into the soil very easily. So when the time comes to give this back to the soil, especially Lacey Phacelia and buckwheat are very tender. They chop in very easily, and they'll digest. The soil will be able to digest them, meaning, again, the microbes in the soil will be able to consume them very quickly. So it's a really fast turnaround. It's a fast turnaround to get more organic matter into the soil. Lacey Phacelia and buckwheat are pretty much what we call soil conditioners. In other words, they improve the tilth, the lightness of the soil, the plantability of the soil. They're not adding so many nutrients from the environment. They're not pulling in any nitrogen, but they do have these other benefits of cooling, protecting, shading the soil, attracting pollinators, buckwheat out-competing weeds. There are some summer crops, especially some of the clovers that you can grow. Like this micro clover is really effective at forming a lovely carpet underneath what we call the understory of a taller planting. Something like corn, for example, it's naturally going to have a lot of space between the plants, even a big planting of sunflowers. Any of these things, eggplants or peppers or whatever the case may be, some of those kind of shade in a little bit and they don't let too much light down in. But something like corn, I space my corn at about 18 inches a plant. So there's a lot of space on the ground. That's space where weeds can grow up. And why not put something in that's going to be a target plant that will cover? Instead of letting the weeds keep coming up, let's get something in there that's going to, one, these clovers will have a nitrogen fixing effect because they're part of that legume family of plants. And two, once you get the first round of weeds maybe picked out of the clover, you're going to have a beautiful carpet that then will serve to prevent the light getting to the ground level and stimulating any future seed growth. Many small weed seeds have light triggering mechanisms. That means when they get up to the top and light strikes them, that's their cue to start growing. So if you can prevent that, if you can cover crop, if you can cover the soil with a blanket, a beneficial blanket of plants, you are providing, again, that cooling, that protection. You're keeping the microorganisms happy underneath. And in this case, you are actually putting nitrogen into the soil. Here's another kind of clover you can grow during the summer. This one is touted as one of the best clovers for fixing nitrogen. And of course, the advantage of growing some of these things during the summer is growth is rapid. When we go with winter cover crops, often, especially in the colder parts of our country or the world, wherever you're watching from, our choices are limited because we need crops that can survive at least part of that season or get established when it's cold. But during the summer, we have a pretty wide range, and we can be working cover crops in just to provide fertilizer, to provide nutrients to the soil, and work that in as part of our plan. So you can see we started off talking about cover crops in winter, which is when people typically think about cover crops. But I hope I've been able to show you just briefly. I mean, there's a lot that can be said about these things, but just briefly how crops like a radish, daikon radish, buckwheat, Lacey phacelia, all these things can be helpers to us. I'm surrounded by the cover crops here. All these can be helpers to us in the garden. And if we're willing to give these plants a section of our growing year, some months, some 3 weeks, some 6 weeks, whatever it is, we work them into our plan. It's great to rest the soil, and we can be improving the soil while we're letting it rest, and then cut some of these down and plant our target crops. The soil will be healthier for it. The whole ecosystem will be healthier for it. Sometimes we can get a bit to eat from the cover crops. But the idea is that these are crops that are really workers for us. They're nourishing the soil. Our main goal is to protect and nourish the soil. And as they say, good soil, good crops. Yeah, feed the soil first, and the soil will take care of feeding your crops. So anyway, I hope your mind is on cover crops. Go look in the seed catalogs. They often have a lot of great information. I love Johnny's Selected Seeds and Territorial Seed Company. They have great sections on cover crops, but there's so many resources out there. Just start digging in, order some cover crop, go to your local nursery, see what they have. Some nurseries have them in bulk, and just work these things into your garden life. You'll be the better for it. Your soil will be the better for it. Thanks for coming along for another episode of In the Garden with MBC. We'll see you soon, and happy gardening.
Hey gardeners, thanks for tuning in to our show today. We'll be right back at it here in just a moment. I just wanted to take a second here to highlight our regular videos and features here on the Urban Gardener channel. Our weekly garden journals, and our incredible feature visits. All right. What in your garden makes you happy? I got so many things. I could talk about them all day, but we've got a lot to get going on here on the show today. If you want to let us know what makes you happy in your garden, jump into the comment section there and let us know there for sure. Love to hear about it. And again, thanks to Mark Boucher-Colbert, MBC, for doing the In the Garden segment there on some cover crops. Great information. Love it. The In the Garden segment will be live though next week on the In the Garden segment here on the Sunday edition of the show, as Mark will be joining us live on the Sunday edition show, because next Sunday is the third Sunday of the month, and we have our gardening book club. And our gardening book club this next Sunday, we are featuring Leave Your Troubles Behind by Karen Hugh. Great book. This is just a wonderful book on all sorts of different kind of activities and things you can do around plants in the garden to kind of relieve you of stress and the things that we're dealing with in life and all of that. It's just a wonderful book. I love talking about this sort of subject when it comes to gardening, that gardening can be used as such a great stress relief for us, to handle a lot of those things that are, kind of going on in life in our life, work life, home life, whatever, and this book is just full of some great fun activities on all the sort of things you can do with plants in your garden to do and deal with all of that sort of stuff. So it's going to be a great conversation. And Mark, again, like I said, NBC will be joining with us live next week for In the Garden, and to be co-host of our monthly garden book club, like he has been here now for most of the season. And it's been really, really fun. We've had some great books so far. We've got another great book this month. And then again, too, remember that we announce our next month's book as well, too, on that show at the end of the show. And then we give away a copy of that next month's book to a viewer so that you can have that book for our book club in the next month. So come and join with us then, so you can also find out about what our next month's book club selection is as well too. Right on. Moving right along here today on the show. We are so lucky today. Like I said, we get each and every month on the second Sunday of the month to be joined with our good friend Gardener Scott. All right. Let's welcome Gardener Scott to the show. Hey, here it is, August already. Scott, can you believe it? It's August.
Hey, I can't believe
it. How's things been growing this month for you?
Good. They're actually doing real well. I have harvested some cucumbers, some zucchini.
Oh, yeah.
My tomatoes are very, very close, but just a load of flowers, insects everywhere, and it's all going great.
Oh, I've been chewing and munching on a bunch of the cherry tomatoes all over the garden right now, and like you said, I'm just about ready to start pulling off some tomatoes off the plants, because they're getting close, which is really great, because I'm kind of glad to have some this year. It's been kind of a struggle over the last few years to kind of figure out how am I going to handle and get tomatoes through this type of new type of hot season that we're seeing in the summertime around here. And it's been difficult. I used to grow tons of varieties all the time. I could grow almost anything when I first started gardening here for the first several years. And then all of a sudden things just started warming up again, like we've seen maybe over the last 7 or 8 years. And it's been such a struggle in the last few, for sure. And I finally found a few good varieties. So we finally got some this year.
Yeah. And that's the big difference, is choosing the right varieties, or finding the right varieties, because I think we're all struggling with our different weather issues. And so when you can find something that matches your climate and that can sustain growth during your crazy weather, and all of us are different, of course, then keep growing that, and that helps lead to success in the garden.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm pretty sure that I think I got this advice from you a couple seasons ago too, talking about tomatoes when I was first really starting to deal with some of these struggles and noticing how hard it was for me to grow. And it's really about figuring out some of those good varieties, because when you're in more, like, my season was more acceptable to multiple varieties before. It's just not now.
That's right.
I've got to be more specific about what I'm doing and what I'm growing in these sort of conditions.
Yeah. And I think you hit the nail on the head. The awareness that you need to be looking for something that will work is really key. Too many of us, especially new gardeners, will take suggestions and start growing something, and then wonder why it doesn't work, but they'll keep growing the same thing because somebody told them to, and they'll go for years without having any success.
Yeah, that is a big thing. Is a kind of a big key to dealing with multiple years of not having success, is switching up varieties. I mean, maybe it's just you need a hardier variety for your climate and your area, and again, that's one of the kind of the cool things about the type of plant breeding that goes on all over the world, is that there's people out there breeding and making sure that there's certain varieties of things that will handle, say, warmer climates, colder climates, And then again, lucky for those, I used to be in that kind of in between where we could just grow anything, grab it out of the seed catalog and go have fun, but that's not really the case.
Yeah, and this year I'm trying all new plants. I've talked about that before, and I'm having good success. So by trying new things, you can always add to your toolbox and be able to pick the ones that work and the ones that don't. And I apologize for a little bit of yipping in the background. That's my new puppy, Lika, and she's in her kennel, supposed to be taking a nap right now, but we've been outside playing and working in the garden, and so she's
all right. Still got a little energy left.
Locked up.
Just a little energy left over. Maybe it'll wear out in a moment, right? Well, that's great though. Nice new puppy, which is really, man, that's so interesting because I've actually been pondering myself, because again, I'm a cat guy. We've talked about this before, but I was thinking, I've got my one cat and he's great, but he actually likes other cats. So I'm like, man, I was thinking like, maybe I would get another kitten or something this, fall, or something, and maybe do something like that. And I've actually been thinking about that. Here it is. You're over there already jumping right into it with a new puppy.
Yeah, I've been thinking about it for a long time, and my son's dogs had puppies, so that was kind of the catalyst to go ahead and take one of his puppies.
Right. There you go. What variety?
So it's a mix. The mother is a Labradoodle, and
okay.
the mother is a flat hair retriever.
Okay. Excellent.
Both are black, and the puppy is black, and so I released a video on Thursday, and I got another one coming out this next Thursday. And I haven't done a formal introduction of Lika, but you can see her walking around behind me just like Mala does. And so
kind of like the mystery tease, right? That's right. Everybody's like, what's this? What's going on behind you? There's another dog. Where'd that come from?
That's right.
That's awesome. It's great. But yeah, that's going to be fun. Keeping up with a new puppy for a while. That was what was kind of intimidating me though too, was the for me, and I'm not sure if this was the thought process for you or not, but and I've rescued several cats already, but this next time I kind of wanted, and they're cats, and you got to deal with cat attitudes, and I don't know, it's different with dogs for sure.
That's true.
But I wanted kind of a cat that was kind of my cat. You know what I mean? In a way. So my thought was this time around, I wanted a little kitten and raise a little kitten to an adult this time, where I've usually went and picked up like 1-year-olds and 2-year-olds at our place down, actually just right down the street here. But that's where I got George and Dexter from. But yeah, that was the kind of the thought there. And I was like, it might be good just to start from the beginning. You know what I mean? And raise up a new cat, and then have that sort of like connection there as well. Too.
Exactly.
Instead of trying to build a connection with a cat that's wondering who you are, what the heck's going on here, and all of that, you have a kitten that's, really, so that was my thought process.
Yeah. They're more likely to bond, of course, when they start off small and think of you as their papa and hang out with you. So that's kind of the reason. I love Mala. Mala was a rescue dog, and had some stress and issues in her life, and we have great fun together in the garden, but she still has a lot of those,
and building those kind of relationships are fun though too. I mean, difficult. I mean, believe me, like George he was a very kind of skittish cat. I mean, he spent the first 2 months of his life here at my home under my bed. He would only sneak out like at night and when nobody was around, or I would have to leave the house long enough so he would have enough time so he can sneak out and eat, because he just wouldn't. If any, he was so bad. It took a long time to really kind of work him out, but he's now like my best friend. So, it's great. But again, like I said, he likes other cats, and he's always, and I want, so I'm like, what, maybe get him a buddy, right?
Yeah.
Is that, you think Mala's all up for that, having a buddy?
Yeah, she, the first couple days, she wasn't sure, but that's
what I'm sure is going to happen too. Exactly.
Yeah, I've had Lika for almost 2 weeks now, and so they're playing well together. They
Yeah.
hang out together, they tire each other out, and
Yeah.
so it's working pretty well.
Yeah, but I'm sure there's still a little bit of dominance, right? This is
A little
my
bit.
space, or that sort
Mala,
of thing.
yeah, Mala is not a dominant dog, and that was part of some of her
Okay,
issues. Is
that's
she was
great.
very submissive, and so she's learning to be the big dog. And
Mhm.
sometimes she gets a little too rough because she's not sure just exactly how far she can go. But it's working. They're both learning how to be the dominant, submissive, but more importantly, just how to be dogs together. That's one thing that I know many of us don't think about when we just have a single pet. Well, our pets, when they don't have exposure to other animals, kind of become human. And then when another animal comes around, they don't know what to do, and they end up usually being aggressive. And so the
Mhm.
idea behind getting a healthy pet is to socialize the pet. And if you can
Yeah.
have a couple of them, like 2 cats in your house, tends to be better.
Yeah, yeah, and on that same kind of line though too is my sense of thought though with my experience with cats, they are a loner type of
Mhm.
animal if that's what they choose they want to be. You know what I mean? They can be
Oh,
very
yeah.
social animals too, and really want to be around them. So that was kind of my idea was like he likes other cats, so maybe that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but if he was different though, if he was aggressive and he was a loner type, I probably wouldn't think about it at all. I would just be like, he's fine
Absolutely.
because he's just, that's cats make those decisions.
Yeah.
And like they make a lot of them.
That's right.
Let's see. Adam was kind of mentioning too here on the lines of what we were talking about. He's like, heirloom indeterminates are becoming harder to grow with our heat. What used to grow well doesn't so much anymore, sort of like what we were talking about before, though. But he's mentioning specifically heirloom indeterminates.
Yeah.
Does
Well,
that
and so
make sense?
that's one of those things when we start looking at alternatives. The heirlooms I like to grow are Russian varieties. The Black Krim comes from the Crimean Peninsula, and so
Yeah.
those
Mhm.
are heirlooms that have done well in my garden. They don't work well for a lot of people who have much hotter environments, and so that's one
Mhm.
of those issues where heirlooms tend to prefer a particular climate and particular weather
Yeah.
patterns. And when those change, then you might look at hybrids that maybe have been bred to be able to handle some of those conditions, or shift to a different type of heirloom that might match whatever the conditions are that are
If you
actually
look,
happening in the garden. And and it tends to be indeterminate.
yeah.
I think most of us mostly grow indeterminates. One option that you have, and Eli from In the Garden and Eli and Kate channel just had a video, because they live in Scotland and
Mhm.
the weather's cooler, rainier. They grow their indeterminate tomatoes completely different than I do. They actually do a lot more pruning. They top the tomatoes early because their season ends early,
Yeah.
and that's the only way that they can get their tomatoes is to actually treat the plant almost like a determinant by doing some
By
really
just cutting
heavy
off
pruning.
the top and
Yeah,
basically just stop it from growing
exactly.
further and put its energy down back into the plants and fruiting.
Exactly. So that's an option too. If there's a
So where
variety
would
that
you
you really
top
like.
something like that if you were to top it though? If you're looking at a plant with very, very top, are you getting
Yeah.
right in
So
there? Maybe a
I
few
actually
stems down?
I have a video on how to top tomatoes, and I'm sure Jay's looking for it right now. But the idea is the growing tip. So on indeterminate tomatoes, at the very tip, there will
Yeah.
be a new leaf, and at the junction, you'll typically get a new branch that will develop a sucker, and then you've got the small leaves that will just continue growing straight. Well, if you
Mhm.
pinch off or cut off those little leaves that are going to continue the vertical or
Yeah.
horizontal growth, then that whole branch will stop growing.
So just basically right where you're seeing like the newest growth right there.
Exactly. So
Right where
that's
you
one
feel
option.
like if you just grab it and pull it, it's gonna pop off.
And if you
Pretty
pop it
much
off,
right at that
it,
spot right there is
it's
good.
done. and it won't grow. But you have to do that with
Hmm.
each of the branches. So you do it
Oh,
on the
yeah.
main growing stem, but if you've allowed any of those
Suckers and all
suckers
that.
to develop into side branches,
Yeah.
they also have growing tips, and you just need to do the same thing. So that's where the harsh pruning comes into play, because when you control how many branches you allow on your plant and you control how tall your plant gets, then you can also control the energy distribution so that the fruit is going to get the energy towards the end of the season completely. There is no more
Yeah.
new growth. So the plant is putting all of its energy into growing and ripening the fruit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's great. Let's see here. And that does kind of uh, one thing that, as we're talking about, that makes me think, and it's maybe just a little bit late in the season because we're already growing pepper plants, but this is something I've loved growing for a long time. But there's always this bit of like people who are you're on two different sides. You're either on one side that says don't top off your pepper plants at all, or you're on the other side where it's like, no, top off your pepper plants so you can get more growth.
Yeah.
Which side do you fall on?
So it depends, and it depends on how long your growing season is. So with the peppers in particular, at the crook between the main stem and a pair of leaves, you're going to have very small nodes, and you can actually see them if you look closely. Well, if
Mhm.
you top the plant or cut the main stem, those nodes are going to grow into new branches,
Yeah.
and you get a bigger, bushier plant. And you could do that at every single junction. And
Yeah.
before you know it, you've got a big, bushy pepper plant.
Yeah.
The problem is that each time you do that, you steal 2 to 3 weeks from the plant, because
Mhm.
it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks for those nodes to now develop into new
Yeah.
stems and
Yep.
start growing. So for me here in Colorado with a short season, I don't do that
Yeah.
because I can't afford to lose 2 to 3 weeks in my growing season. I need to get those plants growing, get the flowers, get the fruit, and
Mhm.
hopefully they'll change color and be ripe by the time my first frost hits. But if you've got a longer season and you can sustain that delay every
Yeah.
time you top off a pepper plant, go for it.
Yeah,
And you're
or
going
even
to end
getting
up with a
started
lot more.
earlier too, because they're good ones to get started indoors. So maybe you
Yeah,
can even get started well earlier to account for that period that you're going to
absolutely.
put them in a stunt.
Yeah. Pepper
Yep.
seeds typically are started 8 to 10 weeks before the last frost date indoors. And so if you're planning on doing it, then start them 2 to 3 weeks earlier than that. So start them, 10 to 14 weeks before your last frost date. Let them grow into small plants
Yep.
and then top them. Go ahead and pinch off that main stem. It'll split into two branches. And now when you put it into your garden, it's already got the split, and
Yeah.
it will be bushier because you took advantage of those couple weeks indoors before you even put it in the ground. So
Yeah,
absolutely that could be an
completely.
option.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And exactly. I think that on in what I've found, that's primarily the case. One of the things I say in addition though is that there's a lot of pepper varieties out there that they're going to bush out no matter what,
Sure.
and they're going to
Yeah.
produce a ton of peppers, and the idea of trying to maybe top them to make more production doesn't really kind of make sense because these varieties are
Yeah.
going to give you more
That's
than
a
you can
good
ever
point.
imagine. And
Yeah,
then I
they're
would say that
automatically gonna split, so and you're not gonna lose a couple weeks because you stress the plant. That's just the
yep.
normal growth. Yeah,
Exactly. So the only ones I have, so I fall on the do it. The only ones I've actually ever topped myself, like on purpose myself, um, are ones that I've grown, say the season before, and they're just kind of stringy plants.
sure.
Because that's the great thing about peppers. I love about peppers. They're all different. Each variety has different growth patterns and do different things. So if you got like long, stringy plants, because some just do this and they stretch out and all that. So those type, I try to get a little more compact, try to get them
Sure.
doing a little bit more and all of that. So I'll regrow those the next season with that method specifically. So I think
Good
that's
thinking.
probably, yeah, again, too, because you got to watch out for some of those that produce so much, you're not going to know what to do with anyways.
Yeah.
like some jalapeno varieties or cayennes, especially those nice small stringy ones are really
Yeah, I
just,
grow a lot of cayennes, and
they'll produce a ton.
they do.
Yeah.
In fact, I didn't grow cayennes today or this year, partly because I'm only growing what was suggested to me, and nobody
Yeah.
suggested cayennes. But I still have a large bag of cayenne peppers from what I saved last year,
That's the
and so
thing. Yeah, you
they do.
get
They're
a good plant
prolific.
in one season, you might not need that variety for several years.
Exactly.
You'll have, because eventually you can powder them down, and then you'll have that.
Yep.
Yep, it's just
That's what
great.
I did with
Just
the
perfect.
peppers the year before, and I still have jars of powder. I love the cayenne powder, but I just don't use enough of it to
Yep.
use all the powder that I've made.
So it lasts a while.
Yeah.
Right on. Serena asks here just a little bit ago too, so she's got a green stock. You use a green stock, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So she says, what makes my leaves turn yellow at the bottom of a basil plant in the green stock? I don't know if it's the green stock specific here on this, right? But
Yeah. So the primary reasons for any plant turning yellow, but basil in particular, could be problems with the watering. Typically, if you overwater plants, they'll get yellow leaves at the bottom. The key is to look at the whole plant, because if the whole plant is turning yellow, it could also be an issue where it's shaded and it's not getting enough sun. So, like on a green stock, you need to rotate the tower on a regular basis. And if you've got plants that are on the backside and you're not rotating it, there can be some yellowing or light green as opposed to dark green color because it's not getting enough sun. Specifically within a green stock, there are a couple issues I think that are most likely. One being the watering, because figuring out just exactly how much water. I know I overwater. I ran into that problem with the strawberries I was growing in my greenhouse this year, because you're worried that it's going to dry out. And so you water it more. And even if you check the outer pockets of a green stalk, they might be dry, but the inside where the roots are actually growing could actually be saturated. So overwatering
yeah.
could be an issue with the green stalk. But also any container, green stalks as well, you need to make sure that you are keeping up with the nutrients in the soil. And so they in our open ground that we amend, or like, I love my raised beds and I'm amending my raised beds, I'm not fertilizing because there's so much organic matter and the soil's so healthy that it's supplying all the nutrients it needs. Well, we're typically using a potting soil in our containers and in the green stocks, and that soil doesn't have all the nutrients that the plant needs. And the nutrients that it does have are usually used up pretty quickly. So you'll need to fertilize more in a container and green stock than you would growing in open ground. And so, a nitrogen deficiency is most likely. But another thing about looking at the whole plant, if only the bottom leaves are turning yellow, then it's probably not an issue. Look at a big tall tomato plant.
That's what I was going to suggest. Yep.
Exactly. It's normal when a plant reaches kind of its equilibrium point where there's enough nutrients to support the plant and its new growth. And every time it puts on new growth, it's going to shut off the nutrients that are going to the old leaves. And the first leaves that it's going to shut off are the ones at the bottom that are turning yellow. So if the bottom leaves are the only ones turning yellow, then it's probably not that big an issue. It could be normal. But also
those first few
overwatering and sun
stems
and
usually
nutrients.
kind of do, in most plants, just kind of wear out. They're just kind of they're just kind of like, if you think about a kid, or their first development of teeth or whatever, or in these sort of ideas of developing, so it's just those things are just there long enough to give that plant the energy it needs to go through that stage at that moment. And then those next ones are built for the next stages of the plant's life, so it doesn't necessarily need those ones, and they kind of shed them off a little bit. And that's where I kind of reference back to those peppers a little bit. That's really the case. Those first few stems on a pepper plant that I grow, you know, are never a part of the final plant that ends up making it out into the because they do. And especially those first cotyledon leaves. Every plant should, you know, those, and it's kind of shows you what the idea of that is that those are just literally there for that moment of its development.
Yeah, they're there for photosynthesis to get energy to the plants, and as new leaves grow and shade out the old leaves, now the old leaves aren't exposed to the sun, and their job is done too. And
yeah,
those
that's
first
why it's
leaves definitely are the first ones to fall off.
That's why it's important, like what you said. First off, though, is check out the whole plant. What's the whole plant doing?
Yeah,
you know
exactly.
what I mean? Then you can kind of assess, okay, well, it's just these bottom ones. And then at that point in time, yeah. But again, too, if you're seeing yellow throughout the plant, then again, right,
now you've got a bigger issue. If
water issue.
Chlorosis is a good term for gardeners to know, because when your leaves start turning yellow, but the veins are still dark green, that's showing nutrient deficiency primarily. And then you need to start considering adding fertilizers.
Yeah, that was actually one of our garden terms a couple of weeks ago, was chlorosis. Yeah,
it's a good one.
About that. It's a good one to know, because and then that's just again too, the looking for the signs of what it is and stuff. And really, if it's just the bottom ones, then let's see here. I did have another question here. Rick asked about, let's see here. Scott, have you got your garlic ready? How many varieties? Saw an older garlic planting, must be planting video you did back. About 7 varieties you had. Yeah.
So my harvest is done, and I actually did a photo on my Instagram a couple days ago with my music garlic. One of the tips that I like to do each year with my garlic is to actually label the garlic. So when I have a bulb that I'm going to use to plant again, I'll actually write it with a permanent marker on this outer skin of the garlic.
Say, what kind of sticker you get that gets on a garlic?
You know, when you're collecting multiple varieties of garlic, they're going to get mixed up. And so I write directly on the bulb, so I know which variety is being planted at planting time. That's the easiest and best way I know. And so when you're dealing with a number of varieties, and so right now I'm planning on I got about 5 varieties. So I have Shashili, which is a very small garlic bulb, and you're able to plant more bulbs closer together, but they're really small. And then Music, which is actually a pretty big bulb, and I'll definitely be doing that. That's my favorite. But I have another 3 or 4 varieties, and I've mentioned this on my live stream in the past, that shortly after I made that video where I was growing all these different types of garlic, they were all labeled very well. We had a horrendous thunderstorm with hail and wind, and it broke and blew away all of my plant tags. And so when it came time to harvest, I was growing like 3 different types of purple stripe garlic. So I'm still growing purple stripe garlic, and I can see a few of them are different as far as the size and the striping, and I'll continue to grow those, but I don't know which variety is which because all the plant tags ended up getting destroyed. So a handful, 5 or 6 varieties is what is going to go in the ground, but the only ones I know for sure are the Shashili and the Music.
Yeah, I've got just this soft neck variety that I've just been kind of going through each year now I kind of restarted about 3 seasons ago with new one, but this just basically, going to the market, grabbing some from the organic section of the store, just to show that you can grow it. And it's usually a soft neck variety you're going to find at your store like that, unless you go to like maybe a farmer's market and find some good, maybe local hard neck varieties being sold. But so I do those here and all of that, but I got a variety from one of our viewers, Nancy, who sent me this German hardneck she had, and it's just really good. It's really great. And I was growing that here for a while, but then when I moved over to my friend's plot, we brought them over there. So we grow those. And this last year we grew 300.
Nice.
300 that we harvested a few weeks back, 300 bulbs out of 2 that she sent me like 3-4 years ago.
That's what's so
talk about
amazing.
exponentially growing something.
Yeah.
Is you get one bulb, like the soft neck. That's one bulb I bought out of the grocery store 3 years ago or so, and it's still growing each and every year. And I get plenty to harvest for myself, plenty to put back out in the garden with some nice, and again too, those big fat bulbs, right?
Yeah,
you want to eat them. You want to eat them. You want those. You think they're the best ones to like harvest for yourself, but they're actually the best ones to harvest for next year, right?
Exactly. And so we were talking about the tomato varieties and choosing the ones that do best. Same thing with the garlic. The varieties that produce the biggest bulbs with the biggest or most cloves. If you want to do what you did, where you start with 2 and you end up with 300. Grow some of those varieties that will give you a lot of cloves, and then you choose the biggest, and before you know it, you've got a ton. And then you can add more. Then you can add, a Russian striped, or there's so many. A Siberian. I was growing Siberian. There's so many wonderful hardneck varieties that. In fact, I have a video. I'm sure Jay will be looking for this one too, where I actually was trying to determine the best tasting garlic. So I had all of these different varieties I was growing, and I tasted them, and I had some family members that were tasting them, and it's incredible the difference in taste between the different garlic cloves. You're talking about that would be you got at the store.
I've got to check that out. Actually, I hope she does put that link up, because I think that you always think, a tomato taste test, or do those sort of things. That's a natural. Everybody does that. A garlic one though, that's where it's at right there.
Yeah, some of them
see those
really,
different
really
flavor
hot.
profiles.
Some are sweet, and it is an incredible difference in profiles, because we're used to the soft neck variety that we buy at the supermarket. And then like you save some of those and you grow them, and then it's exactly what you're expecting. And it's those new unique ones that really add some excitement to the kitchen. And it's also incredible. Some of the ones that when you eat them raw are very, very spicy. They'll mellow when you cook them and just have incredible layers of flavor. So garlic is a lot of fun.
Yeah, garlic is great. And again too, one of the coolest things about garlic though too is that it's just probably one of the most easiest things you can grow. And it really is. And one of the things I've thought, and I've also suggested to a lot of people who don't necessarily have like garden space or big or anything like that, is like, I tell them, if you like garlic and you don't necessarily grow it, it's one of those things. I know you got probably some flower beds or some sort of things around your space somewhere. Just go pluck some cloves down in somewhere in the fall time, and then just let them do their thing. And you'll just be amazed, because you'll be harvesting garlic next summer going, wow. All I did was poke those in the ground. And
I get people commenting on my garlic videos all the time saying, I'd love to grow garlic, but my ground freezes. Well, I'm in zone 5B. My ground freezes in December, and it is rock solid until April. And that's no big deal. Garlic can handle really cold, frozen conditions.
In fact, it needs that. Yeah, and that was my biggest lesson learned when it was, because the first time I grew garlic was when I was first learned, those first year of growing, gardening has now caught me, and I now it's probably my next season, but garden's caught me now. I've got every seed of everything I can possibly think of. And then garlic, I know, and I heard somewhere garlic you put in the ground from the cloves. So I went and got some, and you can get it from the store. So this is as much as I knew, but I was plucking them in the ground in the little things, the cells. The cloves into the cells, just like I was doing with all the other seeds I was doing in my garden, And I was just going at it right in the spring, just like all of that. But it was the biggest lesson I had to learn was like, I was like, why isn't my garlic growing? You know, why am I not getting any bulbs or anything?
That's right.
And then finally it took me a couple of seasons to be like, hey, you know what? Let's actually research this. And then that's what I read. Oh, wait, you got to plant them in the fall time. So you figure that out, plant them in the fall time. It's the one thing you don't think about because we're harvesting them in the summertime when we're gardening and doing everything else.
Yep.
You know, we don't think about that. We started them all the way back then, the year before.
That's exactly right. And that's what makes it so easy is you just stick them in the ground, like you were saying, in the fall.
Yep.
That's the hard part is remembering when to do it 4 to 6 weeks before your first hard freeze. And then you just almost walk away.
Yeah.
And then wait till they appear. You know, I've got in some of my videos, you can actually see the garlic growing up through the snow. And it doesn't care that it's cold. It will grow when it's ready to grow. And then you harvest it usually in June or July. And then you start the whole cycle over again. So it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. And the only time I'm finding for where I'm at, though, the only care I've really got to give garlic is at the end because summer's hitting us so much earlier and harder that, you know, it still needs maybe about that last month or so. And I can't let the ground dry up on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's what'll happen if I'm not watering. So I do got to get out there and water and make sure that I'm taking care of that as that's happening leading up to harvest. So that's pretty much the only care I've really got to do for any of my garlic is that last month, just make sure the ground doesn't harden up and they're perfectly fine.
Yep.
Yeah. Perfect. And it's so great. I love some good garlic and I got to try that sometime. Get a few different varieties and do
some of those is really interesting. Hard necks in particular. The soft necks I find tend to be closer to the same. I mean, there are different varieties and there will be different flavors in the soft necks. But it's really the hard necks that you're going to find such diverse taste profiles.
Yeah. Rob mentions here, he says, I only grow garlic at home. He says, I get rust down at the allotment. Let's talk about rust. What are we talking about?
Being an allium and rust, you know, knock on wood, I don't have rust problems. But if you've been trying to grow onions and you get rust, then you're going to have the same issue if you try to grow garlic or shallots or any of those plants that are in the same family. And so options like you were talking about is to grow them in containers where you probably, you know, as long as you get new, fresh soil, it's not going to have the rust issue, or growing in a complete different location, like grow them at home as opposed to allotments. You know, just about every disease that is in an area is probably going to be
being just passed around and handed around, new plants and new things. So new things are getting introduced to the area, then handed down over this way. Rust, though, is this a fungal issue?
Yeah. And, you know, there's a couple different types of diseases that are typically grouped into the rust category. And there are some things you can do. And
how does it present, though? Really, because I don't think I've really seen this. I mean, I've heard about it.
Yeah, you'll actually see the color change on the plant. That's one reason why it's called rust.
Just changes color.
Yeah, and it depends on which type of disease it is and the type of plant, and some affect plants more harshly than others. And so like any disease or any pest, it's really important to try to identify exactly what it is, and then you can take precautions. But you know, there are many that are once they become established in a garden, it's really hard to get rid of them, and they'll last for years, either in the soil or in the mulch or in the plant debris. And that's why often the easiest and best solution is just to go to a different area. That's a big reason why I like raised beds, because if you have a problem develop in one raised bed, then you can isolate that bed and keep that disease or pest from spreading in many cases.
Yeah. Or if anything comes down to it and you just gotta burn it all down. You can just remove all that soil and take it all the way down to the bottom and reset it if you needed to, if it gets so bad. That's why raised beds are great. Containers are great in that sense. That's why I really like that kind of sense of being able to reestablish your soil if anything starts to come and starts to happen. Right on, right on. Let's see here. Just want to make sure we're all right. Let's see here. Oh, Sam's here joining with us. He just says, hello, Scott.
Hello, Sam.
Awesome. So yeah. Excellent. So let's see here. One of the questions a lot of people are asking around right now to kind of keep us on tomatoes for a second here, because again, everybody's favorite. Why are my tomato leaves curling?
It could be a lot of issues. For many of us, it's the weather. It's so hot. I've been around 90 degrees, 32 Celsius for many days over the last couple of weeks. And in my part of Colorado, the humidity is less than 20%, and it's really windy. So when you throw in heat and wind and low humidity, the plant is going to try to protect the moisture within the plant. That, through transpiration, the moisture is going to be lost. So the plant tries to keep the water it has, and one of the ways it does that is with curling. So this time of year, that tends to be the most likely cause is the weather. It's hot, it's windy, it's dry, and your tomato leaves are going to curl. They should uncurl, and it shouldn't be the whole plant. Like we were talking earlier with the new growth and the old growth is going to turn yellow. You're typically going to see like some of that newer growth, and the top part of the plant is going to curl before the older, bigger, thicker leaves. So that's one way to look at it and see if it's a weather-related curling. There are a number of diseases. In fact, tomato leaf curl is a disease that could be hitting your plant. And so that's why you have to look at the whole plant, and you got to try to differentiate between a weather-related or a disease-related. And then it could also be a water issue. If it's too much water or too little water, one of the things that the plant does
these darn tomatoes, like we say, I mean, they're just so finicky.
And they are. But if you can keep a nice consistent moisture level, and I've got shade over my tomatoes to help reduce some of that weather-related sun factor, you might get a little bit of leaf curl, but it shouldn't be a lot and not enough to actually affect the plant. It's when the whole plant gets leaf curl. And I had a plant a couple years ago. I was doing a test between 3 different ways of planting, and I showed that in a video. And one of the plants right next to where those were growing started having severe leaf curl, and it was the only plant in that tomato bed that had leaf curl. And so when you see those kind of things, it's like, why is it only one plant? If it was weather related, you'd see multiple plants. And so as I looked closer, it was the leaf curl disease, and I ended up pulling the whole plant so that it wouldn't infect the others, and I haven't had a problem since. So big picture, not only the plant that's affected, but all the other plants near it will also help identify what kind of problem it might be.
So this leaf curl disease, is this something that would transfer to other plants? Or is it really just, so it would. So like this would just,
and that's why I pulled it, because it came in, who knows where it came in from. But by isolating it to that plant, I was able to keep it from spreading.
Okay. Yeah. That's great. Yeah. Something to keep an eye out for. So again, too, if like, you notice this going on, it's most all of the plants, it's most likely weather related. But if you only got, say, a couple of plants and one of them kind of looks like it might be a leaf curl disease, probably a good idea to get it out of there.
Yeah.
Or if, say, it cools down and the plant isn't kind of uncurling,
Yeah.
you might
And
want to look into another cause.
You can go online and, do a search for tomato leaf curl.
Yeah.
And there are thousands and thousands of photos of the different factors, and you just find the one that matches most closely with what you have.
Yeah. And so so in that sense though, of what it's doing in holding on to water and holding on to that, is that similar to what we're seeing, say we're growing squash or cucumbers? When it gets over 100 degrees around here, it doesn't matter how watered I get them, how cooled down I get them, and all of that, they still limp out. And those leaves just kind of hang.
It's similar, but it is different. So so the wilting, and you're going to see it with those big leaf plants, the squash and the zucchini and the cucumbers.
Yeah,
you're going to see the wilt begin to happen pretty early and dramatically. It's happening to probably all the other plants in the garden, but it's just most pronounced with those plants. That's a normal part of the transpiration process. The water is moving up through the plant, and then it's being released through the top of the plant as water vapor. And so as the water is flowing up the plant to the leaves, that's what makes it turgid. That's what makes a plant erect and sturdy. Well, the way the plant tries to avoid losing too much of the moisture is it shuts down that process. So stomata are very small cells on the leaves, and that's where the water vapor escapes. And the plant has the ability to open and close those stomata cells. And so if it gets too hot and it's too dry, it shuts the cell so that it doesn't lose water vapor. Well, what happens now is that the water is no longer moving up through the plant, and it gets wilty and limp, and it begins to fall to the side. As soon as it cools and as soon as the water returns to the plant, it's completely reversed. And so I'm fascinated by that, and you can see it over the course of a couple of hours, where at the heat of the day, all of those plants are wilty and they look like they're going to die.
Yeah.
And then come back out just before sunset, and they're going to be bright and
just right back,
and everything is wonderful.
It's amazing. Because it's like almost like a wet towel, the way they wave the leaves. Will, if you go there and wave the stem, it's just like they're just flopping around, and it's like, how in the world does that just come back to just a solid life like that? Later in the day, it is really kind of fascinating how that works.
Absolutely.
And does that. But it's just really kind of a defense mechanism in a sense from the heat, in a way, because it's just so dang hot. It gets so hot around here. Yeah. And again, too, Adam's been mentioning too in the comments here, as well too, we've got another big wildfire that's really blowing up above us here, and bunches of others. So this is what we were talking about last month.
Yeah.
When you were on the show too, is dealing with all these wildfires and everything. And the smoke, like he mentioned in the comments there too, does look like fog out today. It's really kind of heavy.
Yeah, we actually, when we last talked about it, we didn't have any fires here in Colorado, but over the last week, I think we were at about 6 or 7. But a couple days ago, we had a massive storm come through with cool. Like my high temperature for the day was 55 degrees, 13 Celsius. It was cold, and it was rainy, and it was foggy for a couple of days. And that really helped our wildfire situation here.
Yeah.
And so I'm not dealing with as much smoke now, but your smoke has been blowing into Colorado for many weeks now.
It's coming from us in north.
Talking about we've been getting a lot of the smoke from the Canadian fires as well. Yeah,
I saw the overall North America fire map. And it's just amazing how many fires are burning out of control. They're just not even doing anything about them.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
They just whatever's going to happen happens. And it's just amazing to see how many are happening up there as well too in Canada. Just crazy.
And
But
they've
for
had
us, it's
huge
just,
fires.
this is beginning to be normal every year. And it just kind of depends, who's going to have the more intense year. Is it going to be for us? It's like, is it Northern California or is it us here in Southern Oregon? And I think kind of Southern Oregon's kind of pushing most of the fires and most of the smoke for the area this year, whereas last year was Northern California. It was burning like crazy there, which I'm only 25-30 minutes away from the border.
Right.
So all of that, all the fires from the Siskiyous and all that come right up into our valley, each and every time that happens too. So, and it's been that way the whole month. We've been out, there's some days that are okay. It clears out a little bit. We get some blue skies that aren't too bad, but usually it's kind of like the evening. It kind of comes in and just hovers, and it's just, it gets to be really horrible.
Yeah, it really is.
But again, too, like we talked about, when it comes to our garden, this smoke is really just horrible for us. It isn't really too horrible for our gardens. They're not bothered by it that much.
Yeah, they're not bothered. We had a cycle 3 or 4 years ago now, I think, where not only was the smoke really intense, but there was some small ash associated with it, and that will affect the plants if the ash is landing on the plants.
Yep.
Because it can actually stop photosynthesis. It can clog up some of those cells that need to be opening and closing. But generally, the smoke, even the worst smoke that we've had, isn't so bad that the plants are going to suffer.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what plants are for in a way in nature's cycle, is that they're a filter. And in that sense, and that's what they do, is they take that carbon and all that sort of stuff and filter it and turn it into what we breathe and oxygen. So in some way, our gardens are a really good kind of defense mechanism for ourselves when it comes to not that it's really
that's a good point,
doing so much output that we're really going to gain a lot, but in the overall sense of things, that's what it's doing, though. It is
exactly
a filter.
Carbon dioxide is what most people know that plants take in and release. They use the carbon and then release the oxygen, and so that's a big factor for the plants. But also some of the carbon that is in the smoke that will fall down to the soil. Also, it's being used by soil organisms and
and
plants,
and then
themselves.
The soil starts pulling that in and all of that too as well. So and overall, I mean, it's actually they're actually good. That's why they do controlled fires. That's why they do certain things to manage and do in certain ways. And but in the long run, smoke has the one, like you said, that one detrimental thing that it can do, and especially if you're really close to wildfires. I mean, if you got smoke that's drifting in from long distances, it might be that a lot of the particle is fallen as it's gotten to you. But if you're close enough to them, you're getting some heavy particles in that smoke that's just coming down like snow, and it will accumulate on those leaves and all of that. And we want the leaves to be able to breathe that smoke in, transfer it into oxygen. So the one thing we can do to help them out is kind of keep them washed off of the buildup.
Yeah, and do exactly that. That one of those years with the big fires, and it was like snow. I mean, we had ash falling all over, and I just went out with my hose and regularly sprayed the plants and washed off any ash that was on the plant before it could cause any damage.
Yeah. And that's pretty much all we got to really be concerned about when it comes to the gardens. It's just, as I think kind of Adam was talking about in that original comment there, it's up a little ways, otherwise I'd get it. But it's an inhibitor to getting out. Yeah, it's an inhibitor to us getting out into the garden, though. It's because it's not good for us, so you're going to want to have some good type of particle masks and things like that if you're dealing with the type of smoke, especially that we're dealing with here in my area, where it just really builds up. I mean, it looks like fog outside.
It does.
That's how heavy it is, and you should be wearing something if it looks like that.
Yeah, if you can see it, if it looks foggy, respiration is a big factor, trying to protect your lungs, And then Sam was talking about thinking that some of the plants might have been stunted. It's like having an overcast every single day, and your
Yeah.
plants are at that point where they need full sun, and they're not getting full sun. So for
Yeah. I mean, that's
prolonged
another
periods,
thing, is that we can literally on certain days look directly at the sun during the daytime, and it's just a red spot up there
yeah,
because the smoke is so thick that the sun's light rays are that filtered.
exactly.
And it's and yeah, then that means that that's that much less sun and light that our plants are getting to. So that is the other factor, is when it's really dense. Right on, right on. Excellent, excellent. So again, too, if anybody's got any questions here, any last minute questions before we let Gardner Scott go for the day here on the Let's Get Growing show.
Right,
So
I got
great
work
to
to
have
do
you.
outside.
He's got work to do. I did have one last thing I wanted to talk about too, because again, we're getting to this point where mid summer, maybe we're heading this next month towards fall, and things are going to start winding that way and everything. This is about that time of year. Again, we've been talking about tomatoes. We've also mentioned the curcubits, the squash, and the cucumbers and all of that. One of the things I deal with every year that is just a big issue, and I know a lot of people do, and this is about to really hit social media right now, is powdery mildew. I mean, we're out there watering a lot. We're trying to keep everything hot watered during the hot time of year, but as we're starting to get towards this, as things are cooling down, is that maybe the thing? Should we cut back on watering a little bit as much
Actually,
as we
just the
were? Or what's
opposite.
causing this here?
Yeah, powdery mildew is a fungal disease that's
Okay.
actually caused when things get too dry. So
Too dry. Okay.
most fungal diseases are when things get too wet, but the powdery mildew is actually opposite. If you're not
Mm,
watering enough and the humidity level around your plants falls, you're more
yeah.
likely to get the powdery mildew. So keep watering. Don't cut back on that at all. That'll help keep the plant nice and strong, and hopefully fight off the powdery mildew. It's not a terrible disease.
Yeah.
It's not going to kill the plant. It's not going to affect the fruit. It just doesn't look nice. And once the leaves are infected, they're going to end up dying, and so the amount of energy that the total plant gets is going to be reduced. So this is one of those situations, if you got powdery mildew, where you can prune some of the new growth that isn't
Yeah.
going to get enough energy to produce a fruit. Uh, Pluck off some of those flowers so that the remaining energy, which is
Oh
reduced
yeah.
by the powdery mildew, is going to
Falling
go
back to kind of
to
what we started with today.
exactly. And so it's not a tear, and it usually happens at the end of the season.
Hmm.
But that's one of those things. If you have a
And that,
tendency for powdery mildew,
yeah, see, and that
just
is
keep
one
your
of the
plant strong.
things. Yeah, that's one of those things I was going to say too. It is either it looks bad, it kind of break, and like you said, I try to prune off a lot of the leaves that start to get
Yeah,
really infested and that sort of thing. But for the most part, like you said, I think it is the end of its cycle. It's happening kind of at probably the best time it could happen to the plant
right.
is it really is at the end of the season. So it's the plant's about done with its producing anyways, and we should probably be plucking in those off at this time anyways, just to put that energy into what we already have
Yep,
instead of trying to extend it out into new fruit that isn't going to quite make it.
exactly.
Right. Perfect. Perfect. Let's see. Okay, we did have one question here real quick before I let you go for Serena. She did pop this in, I think. Let's see here. How back to the green stock. How often should the green stock be rotated for optimal sunlight?
So I turn mine. I'm watering the green stalks every day, and so when I'm on top of things, and I want all the plants to get equal sunlight, I do it a quarter turn every day. So as I'm watering, I do a quarter turn. So basically, in 4 days, it gets a complete rotation, and that way the plants are getting pretty even sunlight all the way around. A little bit later in the season, when I'm not as active, the plants are a little bit bigger, and they're branching beyond the green stock. Then I do kind of a two turns every 4 days. So I'll water, and then the next day I'll do like half a turn, and then I'll water, and then the next day do like half a turn. So the idea is just regular turning so that you don't have the same side always in the shade. And when the sun's directly overhead at the middle of summer, there are days that I don't turn it at all because all sides of the green stalk end up getting enough light to continue growing.
Right on, right on. Awesome, awesome. Lots of great information again, Scott. Thank you so much for joining with us here, and for everybody who's watching. If you haven't gotten enough of Scott today on the show, don't worry. You can get a lot more of Scott right away tomorrow morning, his live stream on the Gardner Scott channel, which we've got a link to right down below in the description here right now. He'll, if you didn't get your questions answered today, or if you got something more that's pressing you need to get taken care of right away, you don't have to worry. He's, like I said, he'll be right on tomorrow morning. What is it? 8 a.m. Pacific?
8 a.m. Pacific, 9 Mountain, 10 Central, 11 East Coast. And then if you go Greenwich Mean Time, it's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Yep, Jersey. Well, thanks, Scott. Yes.
Well,
Awesome.
you're very welcome. Thank you, Enoch. Always nice to be here, and I'll plan to see you next month.
Yeah. Once again, be sure to come and join with us every second Sunday of the month right here on Let's Get Growing to get all of your garden questions answered with Scott Wilson, Master Gardener at Gardner Scott channel on YouTube. And like I said, link right down below in the description.
Right.
And go check him out there too, again, for that live stream tomorrow if you didn't get any of your questions answered today. And again, thank you again. We will see you next month, second Sunday of the month.
Get out there, get in your garden, and of course, enjoy it all.
Excellent.
See you then.
Go enjoy that puppy.
I will.
Let's Get Growing is sponsored by IV Organic.
Hi, my name is Charles Malky, biologist and plant expert with IV Organics, where we grow cool plants, and author, Saving the World with the Home Garden. IV Organic 3-in-1 Plant Guard has 7 natural oils that protect your plants, not just from the summer heat as well as winter cold, but also protects your plants from damaging insects and rodents. The oils in the product include castor, cinnamon, clove, garlic, peppermint, rosemary, and spearmint. These oils are natural insect and rodent repellent oils, which are encapsulated by the base powder, offering your plants months of protection at a time. 1 application per year will suffice for protection against damaging summer sunburn and winter sun scald, but if the target is pests, application as much as 2 to 3 times a year may be necessary.
All right. What a great Sunday edition of the show this week here. Again, how awesome is it that we get to spend some time with Master Gardener Scott Wilson over at the Gardner Scott channel. So great of him to spend his time with us and to share all of his great garden knowledge. I mean, he's got so much. I just love getting information from Scott when I need to know something about gardening or growing. And like I said, there's so much information I get from him that I actually use specifically in my garden over the years. And that's why when I wanted to do kind of a Q&A segment with somebody, I knew it had to be Gardner Scott. That's why we reached out to do that with him. And how awesome is it that he's been with us all season long, each and every second Sunday of the month, to come and join with us to give us all of that great garden knowledge about all that sort of stuff, and some great advice too. In fact, I'm going to think about that for some of my actually some of those plants out there, like we were talking about at the end about some of the powdery mildew. And again, to me, this is why I need to have him here and learn things about growing in the garden, because I'm trying to figure this sort of thing out. I've been checking out different stuff and different information, and what he's talking about makes sense to me, and I'll work those into some strategies now as I work forward, because maybe what I've been doing now is my new strategy for trying to deal with it this year isn't the best one, is what I'm kind of learning. Because I've been thinking, this has got to be something to do, because I do a lot of overhead watering, and it just seems to, and again, it's one of these things that progresses and it gets worse, and it really seems to take over the plant as that plant is really, again, heading towards the end of its season, mind you, again, which is a really good, important point. But, it really starts happening. So I'm wondering, what is it going to do? Can I do something to maybe hold this off? And I'm thinking, well, maybe if I cut the overhead watering on those and then, that sort of thing, maybe that'll help. And then I started putting the hose down underneath. I don't know. I'm going to continue with that experiment just because it's something I've been running with this year, and I'm going to see how it works. But if it really doesn't work as well, I will know that Scott is definitely right. And these will be strategies I'll work on as I continue to fight and battle with this sort of thing. And then again, too, in the long run, these are just mostly experiments in the garden mostly. And maybe this is just a condition I'm just going to have to deal with year in and year out, because that's what's going to happen. It just kind of seems to be that way all the time anyways. But again, when we have these sort of issues, we want to kind of tackle them, and we want to figure out, is there some sort of solution? Is there some way that we can figure it out? And it is a part of some of the fun of gardening, is getting to do that. So right on, again, so much fun hanging out with Gardner Scott. And like Jay says, how fantastic that Gardner Scott, he can respond to gardening questions so scientifically and correctly, and that's just the thing, you know what I mean? He knows what he's talking about. I mean, there isn't hardly anything that I've ever been able to throw at him. And mind you, again, too, I've just sent out to him before, like, hey, so what do you think of this? Just to get his personal opinion on stuff, not even on the show, So, when it comes down to it, that's really the whole thing. And again, as Jay said, what a great show. And that's really what we're all about here too, especially with these types of shows, is that ability to have these conversations, to have a fun discussion about our gardening, but also learn so much about other things and stuff. Because I even, right here, host of this show, learned a ton today already myself that I'm going to be able to apply to my gardening as I even move forward too. So that's just really, really awesome. And you all are awesome too. You guys have been carrying on such a great conversation. I love watching that about our live streams and everything here, is seeing everybody in the chat, just chatting away about all sorts of things, what we're talking about, and some other things as well too. That's just really, really great. I did want to address one question that happened really early in the show that I wasn't able to get to, because we were just kind of moving along through our different segments. And we got to get moving. We got Gardner Scott waiting in the wing and all that sort of stuff. So I wasn't able to get to a question by Serena earlier. Asked a great question I wanted to talk to before we got to all of our guests and everything, but we'll do it here at the end of the show anyway. She was mentioning about all of the plants in the background here that you see each and every week on the show. And she asked me if they were all real. And I'm going to tell you, every single one of them, even this one right here, they're all real. At least every one that you can see. In fact, there are only 2 fake plants. Let me double check again, as I'm looking around. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if I have any like toy plants or anything. I'm not sure. Might be. Anyways, only 2 fake plants I actually have in this space, but you can't see them. They're up above this monstera that you see right here, because there's actually a 4-foot by 4-foot grow tent that is right here that you guys can't see. Right up above that grow tent, there are a couple of these fake plants that I got from an old restaurant years ago that I did some work with, and got these fake plants, and I've just had them, and they're around, and they just sit up on the top up there, and I don't know why. They're not alive, but I just don't have the heart to throw them out. You know what I mean? So So when it comes down to it, they don't look bad. Every now and then I got to get up there and clean the dust and all of that sort of off and kind of, get them nice and vibrant and clean and green again. But they're the only fake things that I've got in any of my growing spaces that I think, barring any sort of maybe like little, I think there might be like a little toy type of garden plant thing, and then one other thing I was thinking about that I don't think is anywhere around here, but that's anything I can think of that might be as far as fake plants are concerned. So she also asked in that question too about keeping up with watering and all of that too. And that's just kind of like a weekly thing I do, a part of actually what I do here, because was basically the living room, used to be, the TV over here, and we would sit over here and watch the TV, and this would be the living room and all of that. But there wasn't much TV watching in my life anymore. And this whole space was nothing but just basically a plant studio is what it was. And I'd come in here and do plants, and then I would come in here and do my old live streams I would do from the back corner over here, and I would put a few plants together, and we'd sit in the corner and do the live streams and all of that. And I just thought, when it came down to it, why not just build it into a nice little live stream fun studio with all of the plants and everything, because it's what it was. We've got tons of lights around here. In fact, there are lights that go on that I have to move from behind here up this way before I start every show and everything. So we've got lights that are all over for all of the plants that keep them going. So it was basically a plant studio in here that I turned into a live streaming studio, so we can have fun and have all the plants involved with everything we're doing as well too, because we are a gardening channel and we're about growing plants and all that sort of stuff. So it just makes sense to have a bunch of just great, lovely looking plants behind me. And so I make it a part of like the weekly schedule I do, and getting things prepared for the shows on the weekend and all of that. On Friday is basically what I call show prep day. And on show prep day, I'm a putterer, so I'm always doing one thing to the next, and I'm running around doing all sorts of stuff. So part of show prep is watering everything as well too in here, or the plants that need it. Sometimes we have to hold off. Some plants are holding on to water and not doing it. This isn't the time of year where that's really the case. So for the most part, each and every week, we're getting most everybody watered in this space. But throughout most of the year, though, too, each and every week, that it's kind of adjusted based on, kind of how hot it is basically what it is. And then, even then during the cooler season, some of the plants will hold and retain water just a little bit more too, and we're not watering them as often. So we just kind of keep an eye on it from week to week and all of that and everything. And let's see here. Jersey Girl is saying, it's beautiful. It is. It's awesome. I love it. I love it. And right here, one of my favorites right now, I don't know, I think everybody can see maybe this one right here. Yeah. And this might be the last one you all get to see here on the show as far as new leaves on the Monstera. But the Monstera has been one of my favorites right now. And you can't quite see it because it's off camera too, but it's got a moss pole that it's climbing up and growing up. So it's still got a little ways to go to get up on the ceiling and everything. But I think that's the last leaf that you guys will get to see. And it just kind of popped out this last week. So you can tell it's nice and new and green and lighter green and everything. But so that's that growing on. Lots of great plants. Most of them have some fun stories about them. Like I've mentioned on the show before. In fact, I think we mentioned it just a little bit yesterday when we were talking to Bowtie David. He had a cool pothos in his background, and I've got my pothos, which I've had since about 27 years or so that I've had that one. So it's been around with me for many, many years. And again, too, there's also the spider plant, which is hanging down with all of its little spiderlets up here. And that story was my spider plants were my very first plant, and so a lot of them. And again, we got another variety of pothos over here, and all sorts of different things, snake plants coming out of the pothos, and all sorts of really great fun stuff that we've got growing on back here, and also everywhere else around here too. One of the things you can't really see too about that pothos is that it stretches out. Right up above the screen over here is that same pothos that's down here, and it just goes up jumping around and it's working its way around all of this. And I think probably by this winter, or maybe through this winter, we'll get them to join right up here, each side that started back here in the pot. We'll get them to rejoin each other. I think this next winter is about what kind of pace we're on for getting those to come together. So really kind of fun, really great. And just love all the plants and that sort of thing. And kind of reminds me too, is I'm trying to think about right now for our Sunday edition of the show is to kind of put together some fun roundtables and discussions as we've already tried to do before. So I'm working on those and we'll get those for some future shows. But one of the things I want to do, though, similar to what we did with the Hot Pepper Weekend, is some more themed weekends and do a themed weekend on houseplants, just regular houseplants in the house. Talk to some people who are doing some, some really cool houseplant creators and content makers out there who are doing things in just specifically about houseplants, and do some shows about that. What do you guys think of that? Let me know about that in the comments, if that's a great idea or something you might be interested in seeing in a future weekend of the show, talking about just house plants in general, because that would be really, really fun, I think. Definitely for sure. And while we're talking about possible shows we could be doing in the future, let's talk one more time about some shows we just did recently. Like yesterday, we had with us Greg Peterson from the Urban Farm Podcast joining with us yesterday on yesterday's show, talking and catching up, because this was Greg's his third time being on the show. We had him on twice last season, and so I was like, we haven't had him on this season yet, so we had to get him on. So I got him on this last Saturday, yesterday's show. So definitely go and check out that conversation. And as well, we got to meet Bowtie David from Bowtie Life in the Garden, who's always a good viewer of the show that we see often in our conversation in the comments section there. So it was great to have someone who's a great viewer of the show on with us and joining with us for our Are You Following Me segment on yesterday's show. So you'll definitely want to go back and check that out as well too. And also, like I mentioned too, last Saturday show we had with us Kay Cottrell from Late Bloomer channel. Kay Cottrell's just, I could always say, one of my favorite people in the gardening world on YouTube. One of those first channels that I got to watch when I was just getting into YouTube and gardening. And I watched her for many years before I got to meet her for the first time at an heirloom expo. And she invited me to her gardens in Los Angeles, which started a whole thing with me going to Los Angeles and covering all sorts of different gardens and places and things. But it kind of started with all of that. She was one of the very first people to welcome me to her garden space and to do interviews. And because of all of that, we're here today. Hundreds of interviews later, hundreds of conversations later, here we are on the Let's Get Growing show, still continuing the gardening conversation with so many great gardening people out there, making so many great gardening content, like her Late Bloomer channel. Also, gardening with Des. We had Desiree with us for the Are You Following Me like last Saturday as well too. Great conversation. Des has a really great fun content on her channel as well too, talking a lot about, and she was talking about, teasing about, her channel is kind of more about like garden bugs in a way. She covers a lot of stuff about the garden, mind you, but she does have a good emphasis on garden bugs and some reasons why bugs are important to our gardens, and why a lot of the bugs that we think of are scary and bring a lot of fear and everything are actually really beneficial. And one of the things I've also talked about before, many times, on this channel and on this show, is about turning fear into fascination. You know what I mean? And that was how I got, more comfortable with wasps in the garden and things like that, because they are very beneficial. They're what's going to get out there and kill a lot of those cutworms and all of that are, eating up our plants and everything. They're out there praying around looking for those to do that. They're not after us. And once I got that in my head and I could just turn it to just watch them and see what they're doing. And that's something that Desiree does so really well on her channel, is showing us and getting us a little bit more fascinated with those sort of things that are happening in our garden, because it is a part of it. It just is a part of it. And I know a lot of us are really skittish about that sort of stuff. And I knew I was too. So that's what made that conversation so much fun. We're going to have her back again too, for maybe one of those roundtable things that we're talking about, and think about talking about maybe some more integrated pest management and some of that sort of stuff too, which I think is so really, really fascinating in and of its own. The idea of how we are, bring more bugs into our garden to take care of bugs, not try to spray them out or get rid of bugs, but bring more of them into the garden, which is a really, really great idea. So again, I want to also mention again too, next week being the third Sunday of the month, you want to come back here. You want to join with us. It's our Sunday book club, our monthly book club, where we're going to have with us Karen Hughes. She's actually joining back with us. She was a guest on last year's show. I found this book through one of my favorite podcasts that, I don't know if everybody noticed, just right over my shoulder, there's this little thing that says 10. I don't know if anybody's ever wondered, what does he mean by 10? What does 10 mean? And that's basically this podcast that I've been listening to for 15 years or more. 17 years, maybe, a long time. This podcast has been around since it was a radio show back in the Seattle days when I lived in Seattle. And Karen's from the Pacific Northwest as well too, and she's been listening to the show as well, and she is a 10 as well. And that's kind of how I got to know about her, was listening to this podcast, and they were mentioning about her book and everything. So I reached out to her, got her book, read it, and had her on the show last year. And so when we thought of this book club, I knew we had to talk about her book and bring her back on to talk more about that. So definitely, if you haven't had an opportunity to check this book out, it's called Leave Your Troubles Behind: How to De-Stress and Grow Happiness Through Plants by Karen Hughes. And just a wonderful book about all sorts of plant activities and all sorts of things to kind of just de-stress. Like she says, de-stress from life and all the things going on around us. And this is a perfect time, especially for us in the States who, there's just all this stuff going on right now in the world, and a lot of things that are just being bombarded on us and all of that. So, our gardens are a great place to de-stress. Handling and taking care of plants and all of that are a great way to de-stress. So this book is a great book to read, to learn about some great activities and things to do just that. So you'll want to join with us next Sunday with our good friend Mark Boucher Colbert. He'll be with us live for the In the Garden, as I mentioned, and to be the co-host of our monthly gardening book club. So definitely come and join with us next Sunday on the show for that as well too. So going to be fun. So awesome again to see all of you here. Like B. Hendricks says, another great one for the books. That's right. And again, too, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have to also mention it here at the end of the show. First and foremost, give us a thumbs up if you haven't already. Click the like button and the subscribe button if you haven't clicked the subscribe button, which I can't imagine you haven't already. If you've been on here already and you haven't hit the subscribe button, definitely do that now. Hit the bell notification so you can be notified of upcoming live streams and videos, but also share with all of your friends. Get the word out about our show. Let everybody know. We got a lot of great viewers out there, so make sure you're definitely telling all your garden friends or garden groups or any places, other live streams you might be attending or anything like that. Let people know all about what we've got growing on here for the Let's Get Growing show here every Saturday and Sunday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time and 2 p.m. Eastern Time as well too. And again too, if you are joining with us at the end of the show as well too, if you got a moment, check out our Facebook gardening group, the Let's Get Growing group. I've got a link right below there in the description below for our group. It's the Let's Get Growing group, appropriately named Let's Get Growing. And you can come join us there at that Let's Get Growing group and come and share all of the things that you've got growing on in your garden too. You know, that's one of the ways that we are, growing community here through gardening. And the Let's Get Growing channel is also by also having our group there as well for everybody to continue the conversation in our community and share with everybody what you've got growing on. Maybe ask some questions, answer some questions, or anything like that. Post some pictures of your gardens because I love seeing what you all have growing on. So definitely do that. Also, real quick too, one last shout out for our sponsor, Ivy Organic, and again to Ivy Organics at ivyorganic.com. The 3-in-1 plant guard is just a necessity for every garden. I really encourage everybody to go get some of that 3-in-1 plant guard from ivyorganics.com. Use our promo code GROW10 at checkout, GROW10, to get 10% off of that 3-in-1 plant guard. It's definitely something you should have in your garden shed. For sure, definitely. So right on, everybody. Again, another wonderful show here on the Let's Get Growing show. It's been so awesome to have all of you here with us. And like Riverdale Garden says, great live. If you do a house plant live, you have to get Tony O'Neill. I know Tony has and does some really great things with house plants as well too. So he's definitely someone we would have to look to talking about and having for house plants if we're going to do that for sure. That's a great suggestion too, because I like the idea of doing that. So we're gonna have to think about that as well as a few other things too. I want to do kind of maybe a weekend talking about some bees or something too, just kind of these fun weekend ideas like we did with the hot pepper weekend. That was really fun to do. I think it's something we should think about doing as we move forward for sure. So so definitely that's something we're going to look to do. And again so I'm just trying to read through some of these comments as I'm closing out the show here, but thank you all so much for being here and spending your weekend with me. And again too, so much to do, so much going on. I've got to get out into the garden and get doing some things that I need to get growing on and doing too. So again, it was really wonderful to spend my time this weekend with all of you here on the Let's Get Growing show. And I hope to see all of you and many more next week on next Saturday's show. At 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, like I said, 2 p.m. Eastern, and same time for our Sunday edition too. So we'll see all of you next weekend.